another short video about not enoughness. How quickly it's not good enough becomes I'm not good enough. Burst that thought. It's erroneous, false, a bad piece of coding. Something negative crept in and you believed it. To be constantly in the state of not enoughness is an itch you can't scratch. It becomes a psychological issue, an unstoppable wheel. Something has to change. Not enoughness. On one hand, striving has a good quality, striving to be better than oneself, striving to, attain something deeper, something more. None of these things on the human level are intrinsically wrong, but when there's a wound in the seeking, when there's a wound in the striving, and it becomes not just a moving towards something, but actually also a running away from something, then we've got a problem. The restlessness of the agitated self, the restlessness of us, the restlessness of the ego self, it has a quality that can bring us to growth and expansion and depth and some sort of achievement. But equally, that restlessness can kind of turn inwards and, become a source of great suffering. Not enoughness. It's not good enough. I'm not good enough. As soon as we get to I'm not good enough, that's where it starts to become quite toxic. The last few videos I've done actually speak to this as an existential wound, not just a psychological, not just an emotional wound, those as well, but actually deep in our psychology, deep in our human experience. It's easy to be born into or assume, with our kind of traumatic lives that we're born into in some ways, that I'm separate from everybody, I'm separate from everything, I'm separate even from myself, I'm separate from God. I feel alone, I feel lonely, and I feel worthless, or I feel unworthy, and who I am is not good enough. This who I am is not good enough. And who I am is not good. If who I am is not good enough, then everything I do is not going to be good enough. And all you need is a few reflections from the universe, that kind of back you down a bit, or, feed you some negativity. And there's the confirmation. We look to the world for confirmation, but it might be that we're putting out something, and getting back the reflection of it. Not necessarily, I don't know, but it has to be looked at, because you are good enough, because we're all good enough. And this erroneous coding that happens to us, that kind of enforces a problem with the self, it's just no good. It's just, it creates such a destructive life experience, affirmed by childhood, of course, or happens in childhood a lot, through abuse and through neglect and through, bullying, or through unlove, or through transactional love from parents who were themselves toxic and unloved or neglected or abused, and we experience the chain reaction of the ancestral wound. Many people experience the chain reaction of the wound that's handed down from one generation to another generation to another generation. You see it all the time. And so, if that, and it often is, the wound of I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, then, there it is. We're born into it and assume it as an identity. That's why identity has to be looked at. We take our identity very personally, and it's understandable, but it actually needs to, really be looked at, because a lot of the identity that we've assumed is us is actually not necessarily always us. It's half of it, at least half of it, is implanted almost in us through bad coding from our ancestral line, reinforced by the negativity of cultural conditioning or inequality in class, or being a woman, or being any kind of minority can do it, but not necessarily that. It can just happen, because of ancestry, really. And then the individual imprint that we carry into this life could be that that's what we're here to heal. And that's a great way to see it, because it stops it being so, all tightly, sort of personal in a way. In many ways, to see one's life as the problems in one's life as the very thing that one is here to heal. It's not here to heal it so I can get on with everything else. It's here to heal it and live from the healing of it. And that might take a day, a year, a lifetime. Usually takes a lifetime. We're here to heal the wound that we believe ourselves to be. I found that in myself. The wound of intolerance, the wound of failure, the wound of not really, making it or being anybody, the wound of falling from grace, the wound of loss of innocence. All of these things am I here to heal. And that's all. The wound of love, maybe that's it. Maybe that's it for all of us. The wound of love, and whatever that means, that we turned love into something that is not for us, or the wound of, I have to do this and this and this, and still I won't be worthy of love, whether that's love from another person, which I wouldn't depend on at all, but actually love of myself and love of God and God's love of me. When I say God, I don't mean a Christian God or any kind of religious God. I mean God as the divine experience, a divine, benevolent, unconditional consciousness. Worthy of life, basically, loved by life. And maybe that's it for all of us. But you can't know that until you look at the coding if you want to put it like that, the belief systems that you have, the belief systems that we have about ourselves, it's not good enough. This life is just not good enough. I should have more. I should have been a contender. I could have been a contender. Somehow it makes me unworthy. Somehow I'm just not good enough for this life. I'm just not good enough for what I think I should be. Oh, how can that be? You are what you are. You embrace what you are. The problem stops being one of unworthiness. You step out of the trap. Step out off the wheel of it's not good enough. It is good enough. Let it be good enough. Experiment with it's good enough. And see where that it's good enough and I'm good enough. See where that lands in the architecture. See where that lands in the deeper body. See where that lands in your inner system. See where that lands and meets the one that's hiding inside. It says, oh yes, well you may well say that, Kavi, but deep down, you know, I just don't feel that that's the truth. I have explored this ad infinitum. And I can't find anybody, certainly anybody that I've ever met, anybody that I've ever worked with, who isn't worthy of love. I haven't found anybody who's less than. And from a certain, angle, from a certain perspective, everything is just the way that it is. And the more we can accept the way that it is and walk on the path, one foot in front of another, in some kind of presence, in some kind of love, the best we can, forgiving every moment, forgiving every step, forgiving every footprint, not caught up in mind business, staying here and staying here, then the whole issue of it's not good enough and I'm not good enough starts to evaporate. And the more that it evaporates, the more you can live, really live. Because then you're living, true to this moment, not polluted by these, toxic energies and toxic thoughts and emotions. This is really important, to look at whether I think this is good enough and I'm good enough or not. And I'm not talking about just like, oh, it is what it is, this cliche that goes around the spiritual world. Oops, excuse me. I'm talking about something much deeper than that. I'm not talking about abdicating, doing things. I'm not talking about abdicating, putting love into the world. I'm not talking about abdicating, doing whatever it is that one needs to do. I'm talking about a deeper, almost psychological, spiritual, existential, emotional wound that we tend to carry around unseen, unacknowledged. The wound of it's not good enough, the wound of I'm not good enough. And to root that out, that coding out, and to see if it's possible to either reprogram it or just throw it in the trash. And by throwing it in the trash, you just say, I'm not dealing with that anymore. And when it shows up, you say, I'm not dealing with that anymore. You don't have to argue with it, because it's just not true. Think about it.